Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. We have Kevin Hassett of the White House telling us we may have a quiet period in the labor market. Nothing to be distressed about. Just because of AI displacement might be a little quiet out there in terms of job creation. Also some updates on Larry Summers, who was heavily featured in those Epstein emails that were released. He says he is now stepping back from some of his public commitments. So we will dig into what was revealed there and his response. Also a bunch of updates with regard to ICE. First of all, Latinos who had voted in significant numbers for Trump, abandoning him also in significant numbers. And the Greg Bovino team has now moved to Charlotte, and then they're apparently planning to go to New Orleans. They'll break down what we know about those deployments and also the aftermath of what happened in Chicago. Some new indications about what we may be planning in Venezuela. We'll dig into that. Saagar has a property tax update for all of us. Excited to hear from him on that one. And really looking forward to this interview we have with a top AI safety researcher. This is a guy who had left OpenAI because of his concerns about the direction of AI. He is sounding the alarm, and he co-authored a paper called AI 2027 that's gotten a lot of attention. That is his and his co-authors' best guess of how AI is going to develop and the major consequential, potentially civilizational risks entailed in this, multi-trillion-dollar project that the oligarchs and our government and Chinese and everybody else are throwing tons of money at, tons of effort at. So really looking forward to speaking with him. I've watched a bunch of his interviews and read his paper, obviously.
Yeah,
so that
he's
should
a
be a really good one.
Really interesting guy. I've seen a bunch of his stuff. I know some of you are familiar as well with play clips of him here on the show. Thank you to everybody who has been signing up at a premium subscriber, breakingpoints.com. If you can help support our work, our Epstein exposés, journalism, and more, it actually deeply helps us out over here. If you can't afford it, no worries. Please just hit subscribe to this video or any of the videos on our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, please send an episode to a friend. We've got a ton of new listeners actually coming in from the Epstein issue, which we're deeply proud to have you all here for trusting us with your news diet. So please send an episode to your friend if you're interested, or rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps other people find the show. But let's go ahead and start there with the economy and this quiet period being described here by the White House in this AI. They're saying it's just a little cooling off. It's just a little bit of a blip of what's happening. Let's take a listen.
Last CPI report we got surprised 48 Bloomberg economists on the downside, and even had some sort of temporary bad news because there was a refinery that was shut down, if you're looking at the top line number. I think that there have been mixed signals in the job market and really, really positive signals in the output markets. As you know, we've got GDP now running close to 4%. We've got productivity running up around 3%. And so I think that there could be a little bit of almost a quiet time in the labor market, because firms are finding that AI is making their workers so productive that they don't necessarily have to hire the new kids out of college and so on. But because there's so much output growth and income growth, that's the kind of thing that, a free market will work out relatively quickly as, new ways to spend money emerge.
Free market's going to figure it out. Don't worry about it. It's one of those where I keep saying this. The Biden vibes on this are just so out of control. Like, what they keep doing is they post charts. They say the economy is historically better than ever. If it is bad, it's always somebody else's fault. And if, to the extent that it is somebody else's fault, we're also not going to do anything about somebody else's fault, right? So you can't, this is one of those where with AI, they just continue to basically think that, yes, it will shake out. It's free market, creative destruction, the libertarians' favorite word whenever it comes to this. And, maybe there is something to that. But part of what is so distressing, we're going to talk about with the AI 2027 plan, is basically they keep saying stuff out loud like none of you are going to work in 5 years. And the government is just completely just letting it go. Just this morning, House Republicans are apparently scheming to try and put some language in that will block all states from regulating AI. So any individual state, remember this, they previously tried to pass this gambit, and there was a pushback against it. And I'm increasingly just thinking, like, look, I'm sorry, like, we have to have democratic check whenever it comes to our relationship with this technology when billions of us are going to use it. And you, out in your own words, if we take you seriously, it's going to cause mass layoffs. It's going to disrupt every facet of our society. It's just too important to leave it in the hands of Sam Altman. I don't trust him, and I don't think anybody else should.
Or anyone. Or literally anyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, So I actually been thinking a lot about this week, and increasingly, obviously, there's a lot going on with the Trump news. There's, the Epstein files, there's the big beautiful bill, there's Venezuela, there's the ICE deployments. There's a lot of shit going on with the Trump administration. I'm increasingly feeling like the AI push is actually the main event.
Yeah.
Is like the main, not just in terms of the consequences of it, that I've already been convinced of, but that, in Trump's campaign, you'll recall, you had, first of all, him flip his position on a bunch of issues, including crypto, in order to please these tech oligarchs. You had a bunch of these tech guys who previously were like more or less Democrats or voting for Democrats or supporting Democrats, flip their support to Trump. You had Elon Musk himself coming in with, $250 million plus and taking an extremely aggressive, active role in the campaign, being influential in who Trump picked as his VP. And then what happens as soon as he comes into office? First of all, you guys will remember the images from the inauguration where he's surrounded by all of these tech barons, a striking image and a striking portrait of what was to come. In that initial batch of executive orders, you remember there was a whole slew of them, so it was somewhat lost. But immediately what he did was to roll back any of the safety guardrails that have been put in place by the Biden administration. The whole push of this administration has been to completely deregulate the tech industry. I mean, deregulation in general, but specifically the tech industry, and make it so that it was completely off to the races with this AI tech development with no brakes on the car. We had multiple, press conferences with these guys. You see them at dinners with these guys. This is the central piece that this Trump administration really is about. They're placing this bet that, number one, we can beat China to AGI, artificial general intelligence, and that, number two, it's going to magically solve more problems than it creates. When if you actually listen to the researchers, of one of whom we're going to talk to today, if you listen to even guys like Sam Altman or Mark Zuckerberg, who's one of the least responsible actors actually in all of this, you listen to Elon Musk, they'll tell you, we are planning to replace, at the very least, tens of millions of jobs with robots. Like, we are planning to make you irrelevant. This is already happening. We covered how Amazon, their plans to eliminate 500,000 jobs were leaked. The New York Times got their hands on it. They're already implementing this. There is a warehouse down, I believe, in Shreveport, Louisiana, where it is largely robots already. So this is happening now. And the reason this clip from Kevin Hassett is so significant, I think, as far as I know, this is the first time the White House is acknowledging that labor displacement is already happening now. It's happening exactly the places you would expect, with coders and with new employees coming out of college, so that those entry-level jobs are being destroyed. People cannot get their foot on the ladder. That is where it starts, but they have much bigger goals. So when he says, oh, it's just a quiet time, and plays it down and frames it, actually, Saagar, like this is some plus. Oh, they're just, these companies are getting more productive. It's a good thing, actually, that we're displacing all these workers and there's going to be a spike in unemployment and young kids coming out of college are not going to have jobs to go to. That's how he's framing it. That's how they're thinking about it. And that's how these companies are thinking about it too, which is why they all go out and brag as much as possible about all the layoffs that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, to think it back, actually, if you even roll the tape of our inauguration coverage, what we said is, if you roll back, you may think that the most significant thing that happened in the Trump administration was AI, considering all those tech CEOs, which we literally said on the day he was inaugurated with that picture. AI regulation and all of that has also just been a morass. You're talking about AI. I did a few monologues about it at the time. Unfortunately, the Biden rules, in my opinion, would have basically just crystallized too big to fail with a lot of the open AI and others. At that time, there was a little bit more of a hope for an open source direction. The Trump administration has abandoned even the Biden administration's effective commitment to too big to fail and to regulation, because what they've done, look, they need the AI companies to continue investing in our economy. If they do stop building these data centers, we are in an official recession. Now, we're going to get to some data that already shows some recessionary impact, but the issue is the stock market and GDP is entirely reliant on these AI gains. That's part of the reason they're letting them let fly, because they're like, look, without this, we're screwed. I mean, you want to talk about tariffs and all this other stuff. The discussion is totally different without a lot of these AI companies. And in general, you're actually seeing recession and inflation problems that are bubbling up everywhere. Consumers are more miserable than ever before, literally rock bottom sentiment. And of course, the same type of Biden administration stuff, trying to tell consumers that that they're wrong. Like, they're not wrong. They're empirically correct when it comes to grocery prices, housing, basic cost of living, health insurance, all the stuff that we cover here on a day-to-day basis. And the administration is doing the same thing, trying to blame other people. In fact, frankly, they're just doing it in an even dumber and more low IQ way. Here was Scott Besson for his explanation on beef.
Maria, the beef market is a very specialized market. It goes in long cycles, and this is the perfect storm. Again, something we inherited, and there's also, because of the mass immigration, a disease that we've been rid of in North America, made its way up through South America. As these migrants, they brought some of their cattle with them. So part of the problem is we've had to shut the border to Mexican beef because of this disease called the screwworm. So we're not going to let that get into our supply chain.
So, yeah, the explanation is that some of these people have brought the cows with them, and that's the disease that is spreading.
Sure.
Well, I checked. By the way, I did check on that. What he's alleging is something called bovine spongiform encephalopathy. But from what we see on the CDC website and others, it is not necessarily because people are bringing cattle over the border with them. But regardless, I actually just heard from somebody yesterday, and others, like beef prices in terms of sticker shock at the grocery store are ones where people are paying a lot of attention. But I increasingly buy the housing theory of everything. And when you buy that and you look at the data, it's just a disaster, not only in terms of home prices and rates, but put this next one, please, up on the screen. New foreclosures have now jumped some 20% in October, a sign of more distress in the housing market. Foreclosure starts, that's the initial phase of the process, rose 6% for the month and were 20% higher than the year before. Completed foreclosures, the final phase, are up 32% year over year. Florida, South Carolina, and Illinois leading the state in Florida in foreclosures. They say that some 36,000 U.S. properties with some type of foreclosure in October, such as default notices and others, that's 20% higher than the year prior. I mean, there's a lot of potential reasons for that. Usually, it's just that people's household balance sheet and debt, which we've also been covering here now for years, it does eventually catch up if you're unable to make those mortgage payments. Also, potentially, the government shutdown. Who knows how many of them were, government workers and others who are already behind on their bills and just got a final screw turned in there. So we don't know exactly what the reason is, but if you lived through 07, you don't want to be seeing headlines like this. You just don't want to see it, period, right? You want people to have enough money that they're, at the very least, they can make their kind of monthly bills. And right now, with inflation at the grocery store, with housing, with rates and others, it just feels more unattainable than ever before, especially, and it's not about feeling. You can look at credit card balances, wages flat for over the last couple of years, and you can say it's pretty obvious where things are right now.
Yeah, I just saw this from CNBC as well. It's a corollary to what you're saying about home foreclosures. Home Depot is cutting their earnings outlook as home improvement demand falls short of expectations. Apparently, they missed their third quarter earning estimates. That's their third straight miss. They cut their full year profit outlook. The company said slow consumer spending and a weaker housing market have made home improvement demand worse than it expected. So you can see indications of this everywhere.
Yeah, you can see it in that data. And then also, because AI is the single bet, then you also start to have to pay attention to some of these people who are, exiting their position. There was a huge one. News yesterday showed, let's put this up here on the screen, A4. Peter Thiel's hedge fund has now dumped his entire NVIDIA stock and has cut back even on the Tesla position. I mean, it's one of those where people obviously are trading and all of that all the time, but in general, when you look at the people who are exiting and now starting to call the top, let's say, on NVIDIA, you had Michael Burry, the famed big short investor. Again, it's always the caveat. He has called many since the big short, and he was incorrect, but he is staking out a big position against an NVIDIA and Palantir. But here, what you see is that they sold some 537,000 shares in NVIDIA. The stake would have been worth about $100 million as of the company's close price on September 30th. This Thiel sell-off, coupled with SoftBank's sell-off of its own NVIDIA holdings last week has fueled Wall Street's angst that the frenzy driving these sorts may have peaked, putting at risk the trillions of dollars that are committing to AI advancement. Investors and analysts still looking to the third quarter results that were reported tomorrow to dispel worries of a bubble. At the same time, this I actually found kind of fascinating in a myriad ways. Put A5 here on the screen. So the founder of Klarna, he's the Swedish billionaire. Now, if you don't know what Klarna is, it's one of those buy now, pay later apps. So a guy who became a billionaire by founding a company which has basically saddled people with hundreds of billions of dollars in buy now, pay later debt. So you could call him a debt billionaire. I think that's too fair. Now says, I'm nervous about all of this AI debt spending. Seems to me he's an expert in debt. That just me personally, like the guy who literally created a novel way of debt in the 2020s, which that takes skill. I wouldn't say it's moral or anything, but it takes skill certainly to try and extract more money out of the consumer economy in the 2020s. This guy says, I'm nervous about the trillions of dollars of spending on AI. He says the tech industry is committing too much money to huge computing infrastructure. He is a shareholder in OpenAI, Perplexity, xAI, Cerebras through his family office. He told the Financial Times that huge sums being poured making him nervous. I think OpenAI can be very successful at a company, but at the same time, I'm very nervous about the size of these investments in data centers. That's a particular thing that I am concerned about. He himself calls himself an AI evangelist, and he says an AI chatbot already handles 2/3 of his customer services inquiries over at Klarna.
Yeah.
Now, what he's pointing to, though, and I would keep hammering this home on the show, OpenAI and Perplexity and all these places, they make money. No one's saying they don't make any money. They actually make a lot of money, but they have so much out the door that in terms of commitments that OpenAI itself, its current projected loss in 2028 is $78 billion. $78 billion of losses just in 2028 and $1 trillion in spending commitments just for that one company. That doesn't even factor in xAI, Perplexity, all of these other data center commitments. So if you have even a marginal crawl back to reality, that is a crash for our economy and for our GDP. That's the problem. And I mean, look, enough people are saying it at this point. I don't even really think you could call it a black swan event. It's one of the more predictable things. There are obvious business cycle is one of those things they teach you in like Econ 101, and everyone's just kind of on pins and needles waiting for it to happen. But Wall Street's irrational exuberance, also, it doesn't seem to be fading. There's still billions of dollars being poured into this. So really nobody knows. Like you could be, you could either be a person who is, crying wolf or something like that. Like nobody is exactly clear and nobody wants to miss out on the gains. But some of the richest fund managers in the world, they're taking profit, they're selling, and they're saying, hey, that's enough, we're going to take the cash for what it is. That makes me very nervous.
Well, a lot of the logic of it is people don't want to be left on the sidelines.
Right,
because think of what has been advertised as the end state of AI is one of these companies is going to reach AGI, and that's going to change everything. And the company and the founders, the CEO, the executives, whoever's in charge at that time, that are, in charge of that company when they achieve AGI, not only are they going to become tremendously wealthy, they're also going to become tremendously powerful, like tremendously powerful in a way that we've never seen before in the history of the planet type of powerful, if the promise lives up to what they're holding out. So yeah, these guys who are megalomaniacs want to make sure that they have a stake in the winning team when that all comes to pass. Now, it's possible it never does come to pass. Our guest today will say, he thinks it is. He believes that they are going to get to that point. But it's possible they never do get to that point, that it stays sort of in the realm of what it is now, which is still causing a lot of havoc and displacement and a lot of significant consequences, a quiet time in the labor market, as Kevin Hassett put it. But it's possible, that's the sort of thing like we could as a society sort of metabolize and deal with significant pain, but we could deal with over time. They don't want to be left out of the big seismic revolution that they think is possible here with AI. So that's why, even as everybody knows that this is a bubble in some sense, but why the money is going to continue to pour in is because of that dynamic. The last piece we have here is, getting back to the nuts and bolts of people's lives. And obviously the AI data center build out has a huge impact on that as well. Republicans increasingly blamed for poor economic conditions. We can put A6 up on the screen. And this is an area where Republicans traditionally have an advantage on the economy. Trump specifically has had a major advantage on the economy. That's been his consistent strength up until this term. And now, according to this NRCC pollster, so this is a Republican pollster, for the first time in 2 years, voters whose top priority is inflation and the economy now prefer a generic Democrat for Congress by 13 points over a Republican. And I'm not sure if it was by this pollster or a separate one. They polled specifically on, okay, who do you blame for healthcare price increases? Overwhelmingly, people said the GOP. Who do you blame for electric bill increases? Overwhelmingly, people said the GOP. So if you want to know why the election was so incredibly lopsided this year and why, you know, I think Republicans are headed for yet another significant reckoning in the midterm elections, you'd be hard pressed to find a better explanation than this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, the economy, look, people always blame the party in power. That's why Biden was blamed for 4 years. And as I said 4 years ago, almost to the day, you have to appear as if you're doing something about it, as if you care about it. And instead, you know, you're that's why the Epstein thing is important, because you're blocking that while also seemingly not doing much for me and obsessing over your own personal quest to get the Nobel Peace Prize because you've ended 90 wars now or whatever at this point, right? The Democratic Republic of the country. Everyone is celebrating, of course, the end of potential end or whatever of that conflict. But that stuff, you know, the narcissism and all of that, people can deal with a lot as long as their economy is doing well. The classic bumper sticker of the Trump era or the Biden era was, could use some mean tweets right now, as long as the gas was $2. And just like, well, the whole point beyond that is I don't care about the personal conduct or whatever, as long as things are going well in my life. And it's like, well, if things aren't going well in your life, well, then that stuff actually all really does start to matter. That seems to be the overall endpoint for a lot of this. And look, I don't know. I mean, you know, you don't want to read too much into a single day movements, but there's just been like slow kind of movements in the S&P 500. There was one yesterday.
Futures
there was a
are down
drop.
this morning.
Futures are down again this morning. We're not, you know, things can change literally on a dime here, but Federal Reserve doesn't look like it's going to step in and do anything drastic anytime soon, right? So things generally seem to be in stasis for now, and stasis is trending in a down direction. If you look at house balance sheet, housing, and more, nobody is planning anything radically to save you. In fact, they're probably planning something radical in the opposite direction, which I'll get to in property tax bit. Like, if anything, the people who are at the top in the status quo are doing everything they possibly can to preserve said status quo. And in a way, I think they are girding themselves for a potential crash to insulate them from any potential chaos and make it so that the younger people and the new generation will not only bear the entire brunt, but will be the ones who are totally screwed while they're completely safe.
I mean, it's when you think about the AI aspect, it's much worse than the status quo because they're actively planning and celebrating feeding you to the wolves. I mean, that's what Kevin Hassett is saying. It's like, oh, it's great that they don't have to hire these kids out of college anymore. That's great. It's improved productivity. That is their goal. Like, their goal is to make it so that you are irrelevant. Your labor is irrelevant. Like, forget about cheap labor. They want no labor. They want, you know, to hand as much off to the robots as they possibly can. That's their goal. That's the stated goal of all of these tech executives. That's, you know, when you ask yourself the question, okay, these $1 trillion, you know, spend that OpenAI has planned, and these other companies, you know, somewhere similar ballpark figures as well. How are they going to make that money? It's not going to come from you and me signing up for, you know, a ChatGPT subscription. No, it's going to come from giant companies who are willing to pay large sums of money to get rid of you, to get rid of your labor. That is what they're betting on. And that's what this administration has gone whole hog behind. This is a central driving force, if not the driving force of this administration. That's why these guys gave Trump so much money. That's why they did so much for him for his election. You know, they're also sort of directly involved in the mass amount of wealth that he's accumulated through his crypto scam. Like, this is the play. And so, you know, when Kevin Hassett comes out and is openly celebrating and justifying significant layoffs and lack of hiring because of AI development, everyone needs to pay attention to what their actual goals are and the way that they are using policy and executive orders and funding and financing and relationships to build this whole thing out. And thank you for the flag about that they're trying to do this thing again of states can't regulate AI, which is absolutely insane. And everybody needs to be screaming from the rooftops about this.
That's why I'm not exactly sold on the master plan, because I don't think it is. I genuinely think it is a absolute alliance of convenience and of stupidity. Republicans are all dumb and they like money, right? And they want job creators or whatever. Now, Elon and all the rest of these people, no question. Okay, of course, they're sucking up to Trump to try and get as much out of it. A lot of it is to try to hold off regulation and basically to convince them that they're the single driving engine of the economy. And I think that is true. It also aligns with their overall posture towards deregulation itself, because that's something like built into the Republican psyche. What they mostly want is to be left alone. I think that's bad. I mean, especially Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg and Dario. I mean, Dario, he just goes on TV and he's like, none of you are going to be working in 5 years. And everyone's just supposed to accept that as if they're like, oh, okay, got it, right? I mean, they genuinely act as if they're going to face no consequences. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think—
Well, to be clear, I don't think Trump gives a shit about any of it at all. Like, he cares about, the stock market keeps going up.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
You know, I think he wanted to stay on prison and get back in the White House.
Yeah.
And these guys were willing to throw tons of cash at him. And he's checked out of this administration, handed off significant chunks of it to other aides, whether it's, you know, Stephen Miller, Marco Rubio, or whoever. And so, yeah, I'm not saying like that he's a devoted AI acolyte. I don't think he gives a shit. But I think he's turned this whole part of his administration over to these tech oligarchs and basically sold his presidency, this aspect of his presidency, to them. And they're going to get whatever they want from him. I mean, the H-1B conversation is like fits in that, right? And you flagged it at the time when he went on the All In podcast during the campaign and was like, I'm going to staple the visa
to the diploma.
To the diploma. And you were like, what? How does this fit with the other things that he said? Now, listen, you guys, you know I'm pro-immigrant. I am also pro-major reform of the H-1B program, which is genuinely exploitative and does undercut native tech workers as well. So for him to come out now and be like, I want 600,000 Chinese students in our universities.
And he's still pro-H-1B.
And I'm still pro-H-1B. Ask yourself the question, why are these two things so dissonant from the other things that he said on the campaign trail? And it's because it's what these tech oligarchs want. He's going to do whatever it is that they want. He sold this part of his presidency to them. To me, that's just like abundantly clear. And those answers to Laura Ingraham are just one example, one, you know, small but significant example of the way that he has outsourced this whole part of his presidency, which is unbelievably important to literally all of us, to the worst people in the world.
Yeah, I mean, well, they seem uncowed and they definitely seem to have a lot of power, which is part of the problem. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.